Welcome our panelists and moderator on stage, please.
Thank you so much, Parvina. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I hope you had a good lunch break. So now that we're all fueled, let's discuss about the next panel, data provenance in a decentralized world. We know that it's important to take real-world data from off-chain and put it on-chain. So this data fuels some of the most important and widespread decentralized applications that we have, and is the cornerstone of DeFi. In this panel, we're gonna explore how this data gets on-chain, what are the challenges around security and scalability when it comes to bridging this data on-chain, and how data providers currently work, and most importantly, how they can improve in the future. So before we start the conversation, I suggest we do a run of intros. I'm going to start with myself. My name is Bianca Buza. I'm the founder of DevRel Uni, where we teach people how to do developer relations. Today with me, I have Anastasia Melakrinos from Kaiko, Senior Product Manager.
So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Anastasia. I work at Kaiko, so I'm specialized in DeFi data, but I've been at Kaiko for a while now, working around any types of market data and specifically working with the Oracle ecosystem to make sure those data, specifically prices, are accessible to the on-chain world. So Kaiko is a data vendor, so we have any types of market data out there, first CeFi and now DeFi and overall blockchain data. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
Thanks, Anastasia. We also have Sebastian Rodriguez, VP of Product at Polygon ID.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Yeah, Polygon ID. Polygon ID is an identity layer for Web3 based on the principles of self-sovereign identity and decentralized identities. You can check more online.
And Hong Lin, the CTO of Fala Network.
Yeah, hello everyone, I'm Hang. I'm CTO and co-founder of Fala Network. So Fala Network is off-chain computation protocol. Yeah, unlike like the program deployed on the blockchain called smart contract, there are a lot of limitations. For example, you cannot access the internet, you cannot access the data available in the off-chain world. So what we can do is actually run something like a decentralized cloud with the capability to bring the data back to the blockchain. Yeah, I'm very happy to join the panel.
Thank you all for joining. So I suggest we start with an overview, and then we're gonna go deeper and look into the challenges and how we can solve those. So based on this, what would you say are the main points that we can take to ensure data integrity and authenticity when it comes to getting data from off-chain and putting it on-chain? Who wants to start?
Okay, I can start. I can talk about the data itself. So when it comes to data authenticity, well, as data vendors, what we can do is mainly make sure that our data is regulated. There are some strict regulations like SOC 2, to which we comply, and which make sure that our data is always available, because availability on-chain is really a thing. Our data is qualitative enough, and when it comes to our relationships with oracles, they're also very strict in data integrity, because they have always their own methodologies, and my answer to your question is actually, in my opinion, it's the oracle's role to ensure that their data aggregation methodologies are good enough and strict enough for data providers to actually come and comply with what is needed from the consumers.
My turn, I guess.
Whoever wants to
Okay.
jump in.
Well, I'm a bit of an outsider if you think in identity, but I like to position myself as an identity oracle, and then things start making sense. The challenge that we have is to bring identity signals or identity traits of an individual to the chain, right? And the challenge when talking about bringing this information to the chain is, first of all, you need to define what is the source of truth, of trust. And then you need to carry that trust across multiple interactions and transformations without breaking it. And that is not an easy task, right? You may decide that if the source of trust is public signals, like your on-chain activity, that is quite easy because it's deterministic. But if you're trying to bring real-world signs like your social reputation or your KYC data or things like that, right? You need to find a trusted organization, and you need to ask a trusted organization to create that information, sign it, and then that needs to be passed across multiple layers without breaking that cryptography, right? To make it really, really trustless in all the way, right? Sometimes that means just using public key infrastructure. Sometimes it means to use technologies like zero knowledge to certify the execution of a certain process in a certain way, right? That you are not deviating or tampering with the information in the middle. So I would say these are the two challenges, right? Deciding who is your root of trust and then not breaking it until it gets to the blockchain.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question, and the other speakers already gave a very comprehensive answer. So I just add a little bit to that. So if I'm thinking about getting some data from the off-chain world to the blockchain, there are a few steps. First is that we need to make sure we have the correct data source. Sometimes it's just a single data source, but sometimes there are multiple. So yeah, in terms of the Oracle, usually we do some kind of aggregation to make sure the data will be valid on the blockchain. So it's not just from a single source of truth. Sorry, not source of truth. I think a single source. In this process, I think a typical challenge we are facing in the past is sometimes some of the data source is not like some very public available data. For example, maybe we must have some API keys to access the data from probably like from Google API or some AWS API. So when in this process, if we have multiple like reporters, how to keep the credential to access those API will be one of the problem. So yeah, just a simple adds up on that. And another point is in this process, there are two characters. One is the, we say security. One is the correctness, and another is the availability. Sometimes we call that liveness. So that means if we want to make sure the data is always available, it's not only the correctness, but we also need to ensure the system to ingest the data to the blockchain always exist. So that will involve some kind of like tokenomic to give incentivize to the participants to make sure the network is always up and running. Yeah, these are the two adds up.
I agree, and following on that, you already started to mention some of the practices, but maybe we go a bit deeper and we explore some of these best practices for taking the data from the off-chain and integrating that data into smart contracts.
Well, I can talk about the best practices. I think my case is special because we deal with private information, right? So maybe I can put the focus there and later speakers to focus on the public signals, right? In identity, we deal with private information, and that is very, very tricky when you talk to blockchain, right? Actually, private data is, from a technological point of view, is toxic, right? Because first of all, you cannot put it on chain. Second, you cannot even put things on chains that allow you to deduct private data. And then finally, when you look to storage solutions for the data, you cannot also look into decentralized storage because it's immutable, right? So I would say the first good practice is to use a lot of zero knowledge. So there are two tools that we are using extensively: the zero knowledge Merkle trees. These kind of things are vital to make identity and private data in general work in this world. And then the other thing is to see. The key thing is who controls or who consents access to the data, right? And in that way, we are using the keys for the user as a controller of the data. That is also a good practice because you don't take responsibility on the storage, right? But again, these are good practices that we have learned because we are in that specific business of managing private data and taking it to the chain.
I totally agree. And about the good practices that I would suggest are a bit different. Those are more on the data side of things. One, I would say, is outliers management. So bad data can lead to bad consequences, very bad consequences, specifically financial speaking for the protocols that use the data in the end, and like liquidations and stuff. And one of the best practices we at Kaiko have actually put in place with the years is applying serious modeling, quantitative modeling to our price feeds to make sure that they are okay with what the ecosystem needs. So really take everything that already exists in quantitative finance and apply it in crypto data to make sure that it's really compliant with the needs and sensibility that this data has in the on-chain world, as well as monitoring, of course. I see that more and more oracles provide the monitoring of the feeds that they provide to their consumers, both on the data availability and data quality side, which is a very good thing, and I hope this will continue to be the case.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, and I think another, just one example come up in my mind is the another type of oracle for security. So there are a lot of cross-chain bridges, and those bridges sometimes get breached. So yeah, the recent one was the multi-chain. It was, I think, multi-million, right? So one interesting thing I've found from this this case is that I think probably we can have multiple levels of security assumption. So for example, for some of the data, probably we need very low latency. So in that case, we always get the data from the oracle directly and use it directly. And recently, I learned a new concept called the optimistic oracle by Uma team. So it's really interesting to me. Optimistic oracle means that the oracle data is not just post to the blockchain and use that directly, but it's more like first they post the data to the blockchain, and then there is a game theory kicking for some time. So this kind of game theory can ensure a higher level of security. It can even like be another security layer beyond only the data source. Because if anyone think, oh, this data source is incorrect, or there's anything in the link of the data, then they can point it out and jump into the game theory to try to dispute this problem. But for this kind of data, it always has a long latency. So probably it's good for the bridges to implement multiple layer security measure. For example, if the bridge amount is not that high, then we just let it go. But if it is a very high amount or reach some threshold, then the bridge can be stopped and wait for like a few hours dispute of the oracle data. So this can ensure another layer of security for the bridges.
So Anastasia started with this, like how the measures we take to basically ensure that bad data doesn't come on chain. We know that we can have price manipulation, that data manipulation. What are the risks do you see when it comes to bridging this data from the off-chain world on-chain, and how do you think we can prevent those?
I need 2 minutes to think.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like related to the things I just mentioned, but this time the price data. I think price data is the most often used data on the blockchain for nearly all the lending protocols, and we see a lot of hacks in the past just because someone manipulated the data. And I think the way to mitigate that is to diverse the data source. So a lot of data manipulation actually not come from Oracle. It comes from some on-chain data. For example, some people just use the data from like one trading pair, and those trading pair are just AMM, and it's pretty easy to use like flash loan or get some large amount of the assets to manipulate that. But if we introduce a little bit latency, like we get the data from the real world, from the Oracle, or it's an average of the data for some time, maybe a few minutes, a few hours, then this will be much harder to be manipulated. And as I mentioned, I think another approach is some kind of the second layer security guarantee. So if some transaction it results in a really large like price movement or a really large amount of the assets, then probably it can require a longer time to settle that or verify the data for a longer term. So this can be much harder to be manipulated.
To jump on what you said, which was very interesting about the number of data points we take to actually, like this number is important indeed, but something I think is also important to make sure the data is good is whether it comes, like whether the data providers that push the data on chain take already aggregated data, or it's data that comes directly from market makers or exchanges, so it's data which comes from only one source, and in that case you can have many data sources, and then the Oracle aggregates the data. And I don't have the answer on which model is better, because like there are oracles that use one model, which is like taking the data from the source. Others do like re-aggregate the data from taking the data from already aggregated sources. I don't know which one is better, still to be figured out, but I think this is something we should also think about as an ecosystem, because the results in the data quality can be really different and variable according to situations.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. So like from the practice, from my understanding, although I'm not the real expert in price data, but in my experience, multiple database has their own different security assumption. So like if you're going to make your own data source, if you can, right, then you can choose how many data sets you are going to involve, and like what is the methodology to like smooth the data or to process the data. And I think it's all applied to the different scenarios. So it really depends on the real use case.
I totally confirm, and from experience, so when we push data for example, ETH USD, it won't be aggregated the same as if we push data for a small altcoin. Because the liquidity behind is not the same, and so the outlier management that we apply to this, as well as the number of data sources that we can have to push a reference data, a reference price, is also not the same.
And you mentioned earlier decentralization as a mention to prevent this bad data. Why do you think we don't have a better decentralized way to put this data on chain? What prevents us from truly decentralized data on chain?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, I think decentralization is yeah, decentralization to me is a method, and it tries to solve the problem of trust. If there's only a single person to trust, then the trust is a big problem because the single person can do whatever he wants. So it's just a measure to solve the trust problem. But to solve that problem, usually we are going to involve multiple parties, not a single party. Yeah, but really it depends on the it depends on how we do that. Sometimes like zero knowledge proof can also solve some of the problem. But let me just focus on the decentralization part. I think by decentralized network, for example, have multiple reporter, have multiple participants, and they join the game by put some stake into their like identity or account to make sure if something goes wrong, they're going to be slashed. So this is the game theory involved. But all those methods will have some kind of overhead or the costs. So the more the system is decentralized, the more people should involve, and the more assets will be involved, then the cost will also rise. So yeah, for the very important use cases, I would say the more decentralized, the better. But for some of the small use cases, very long tail use case, maybe just used by a simple game, it's just a single round game happening like half an hour. After this half hour, nobody care about its result. For this kind of scenario, people tend to use less decentralized and more cheaper way. So yeah, I think it's a big trade-off.
So if I hear you well, you're suggesting that, okay, for some sort of data, we use one approach, for other data that is more sensitive or more strict with it. What do you guys think are ways in which the community can basically participate and collaborate with real-world data providers to make these data feeds more reliable and more decentralized?
I like to start with something that you said. So correctness is one aspect, right? And securing this chain of trust is something that I think cryptography can help us a lot to accomplish, to the point that is almost trustless or even trustless, right? You don't need to put the trust in the actors, but you put it in the process, right? But that said, I think this goes as far as the quantitative data. So you can say what is happening in the world without actually saying what is truly happening in the world. So if a community, and now linking this to your question, if a community decides that they want to manipulate a token, right? If there are actual professional people doing this, right? You can hire their services to pump your altcoin, right? So if a big enough community decides that they are going to manipulate the instruments that we see to interpret the world, your role as an oracle or as an identity provider is just reflect what is happening. That is what is happening, which is not really the truth or what you are looking for, right? And then is when you get into the realm of qualitative data, right? I think the next step in solving this has to come from reputation, right? It's a similar problem that we have with the content with AI, right? At some point, you cannot trust the content, and you need to rely on the reputation of the source, right? And this case is the same. So when there is an interest to manipulate the signals that we use to read our world, then we can not only rely on the signals, we need also to rely on the identities that are behind the signals.
And talking about other data, indeed, there is a need, I think, to not only rely on the price, which can reflect or not the reality, but also on reputation of the parties that that exist in the markets or on the blockchain and participate in this, but as well on other data sets. Like I've seen like all of the oracles today, of course, provide to their consumers the price, but there are other metrics like the liquidity in the markets that determine the liquidity of a token that are really important to avoid like protocols making available for their users totally liquid tokens, and when an exploit happens and it ends with, like, for example, bad debt or like the protocol being ruined, its reputation also being ruined. So I think there needs to be education on, I mean, we're trying as data providers to do education on which data, in addition to price data, needs to be available on-chain for specific use cases. So this can be liquidity data, this can be reputation data, this can be, I'm sure we can find many examples of data sets that could be essential for DeFi's and other protocol sustainability.
Sebastian, you mentioned regulation. With regulation also there are some challenges. How do we ensure that the data out there is basically compliant with the regulation? Because we might have additional challenges, especially when it comes to decentralizations. With data that is siloed, that's easy. Like you move the database, you move it to another region, but with decentralized data, for example, when it comes to GDPR or other policies, it's very tricky.
Well, I'm aware that this is an Oracle panel, so if you ask me about GDPR compliance, I think we can take the rest of the session just for that. So I'll answer very quickly. This is, I don't know to which point this is an Oracle thing, because it has to do with the privacy of the data. When it comes to the privacy of the data, and this is something we have researched for months, our conclusion, right or wrong, is blockchain is not a good solution for that. We can work on decentralized storage, right? But there is always something you need to give away. For example, the decentralized storage network cannot be completely permissionless. It will have to be permissioned. It cannot be immutable. You need to have proof of deletion, right? So there's a number of things that when you put them all on the table and you look at the principles of blockchain, you will need to compromise on something, right? So far, if you are interested in that, the best solution we have found is a permissioned decentralized storage network that is governed by a layer of blockchain, so that the nodes have to prove to the blockchain that they are deleting records, that they are behaving according to the governance principles of the compliance, right? So we are using the blockchain as a policy of the database. This is the best approach that we have found so far, but it's really complex topic.
Yeah, I would say this, yeah, indeed, it's a really complex problem. I think the community has been thinking about that for years, like how, yeah, if you interact with a smart contract on Ethereum, how you can delete that, right? It's impossible right now. So this is like a conflict between the technology and the regulation. So yeah, again, I'm not an expert on regulation, but I do think, personally, I do think both the regulation and the technology will evolve altogether. And at some point, they can probably meet each other in a harmony way. So just one example, the things we're working on is called verifiable off-chain computation. And since it's run off-chain and we use some kind of help from the hardware, so we can actually achieve some kind of privacy within the hardware. So like you can run some program, but the data in the program is not exposed to, just like the data on the blockchain directly. So yeah, this is just a simple example. So what if in the future we have better zero-knowledge proof and better multi-party computation to make sure those privacy data will never arrive on a public ledger? Then I think this is the evolve from the technology side. The evolution from the regulation side, I'm not sure, but since the blockchain technology, once it's invented, I think it's non-stoppable. So yeah, I think the world will follow this trend.
Can I add something? Sorry, because you gave me 1 point. So one piece of advice to anyone using oracles or data sources from the off-chain about private data and identities is some common misconception or mistake that we see over and over is people, a single signal about an address is probably not too bad. Like, hey, this signal is proving me that I'm over 18. Fine, let's put it on chain. This one is giving me the signal that I have passed a KYC. Let's put it on chain. It's very pragmatic, right? But the thing is, right, you are keep adding these signals over time, and this is forever, which means you are enriching more and more something that was supposed to be private at any point in time. So you create enough signals that the identity can be detected or linked to the individual, then you have a big problem, right? So be careful when you are start bringing these private signals, even if you think they are harmless, right? And I give you an example of how far we had to go to solve this, just to understand how complex the topic is. So we in Polygon ID, you can share verified credentials in your wallet, which is basically a JSON file. You can prove your credentials to a smart contract directly. So we have on-chain verification of verified credentials, which is quite unique in the world. But the way we do that is through zero knowledge. The thing is, if you have present a zero knowledge to a smart contract that says that I live in a certain country, that is going to stay there forever, right? So we had to go as far as creating a burner identifier for every interaction, so you cannot trace and add these signals and put it under one identity, right? So the complexity of the solutions gives you an idea of the complexity of the challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I even didn't think about that before. So like once people getting reveal more and more information, although it's not zero knowledge, but it's actually not 100% zero knowledge. It always leak a little bit about your underlying data. So that also remind me probably we need some kind of like the privacy setting in your iPhone or Android, right? You can have a dashboard, see what is all the data available for yourself and how you can manage those data and try to make sure you don't reveal the data you don't actually want to reveal in the future. Yeah, but that's really a big challenge, and I think that's yeah, probably a very interesting market to explore in the future.
Building on that idea, what do you guys think are some possible way to basically incentivize people to share their data, and what are some possible models to give them something back, basically, like some rewards to make them share that data?
We have some experience at Geico with, like, since we work with many oracles with different like incentives programs, we have seen pretty much everything, and I can begin with what doesn't work. It has been very hard, for example, to work with oracles that typically give are not clear about the quantity of tokens that they give to data vendors or the value of these tokens specifically in such market, and which tokenomics do not seem stable. However, today most of the oracles have pretty stable tokenomics. So yeah, I suggest that I would suggest as a data provider to oracles to really like focus on the tokenomics, to really have long-term incentives for data providers to come in, because it takes much resources for data providers to actually implement as node providers on the oracle and to push data. Sometimes it requires nodes, like it's really much time. And yeah, that's my main suggestion. Some other models that work and are very like bring much incentives to data providers to do their best to participate in the Oracle and to push data, like the best data possible and in the lowest latency, are ranking systems. Some Oracles use those ranking systems from the moment that they're transparent. They use those ranking systems to incentivize data providers to basically be the best. And I see more and more Oracles doing this. And at Kaiko, it has been really a model that works very well because it really pushed us to work a lot on the data quality that we provide and really improve it intensively to meet the requirements. So yeah, ranking and good tokenomics.
Yeah, let me try to answer that. So yeah, that is about the very specialized data, incentivized to the very specialized data. So this is just my personal thinking. I think, what if we can have some kind of big data or the AI related recommendation, but it's not centralized, just owned by Google or like Facebook. So this will be very interesting because in the past, all the data available by the user is just monetized by those big tech companies, but not the user at all. But what if we can have some kind of yeah, I think it doesn't exist, but what if we can have some kind of user profile, decentralized user profile only for the user? So since it's decentralized, so the data can be owned by the user, then the user can use those data to to get some monetization for themselves. For example, you get some ads recommendation, but since those sellers are using the user data, so of course they should pay for the data, and the user can get some incentive, for example, some discount on their purchase. So this is like an incentivize. In the end, I think it's a kind of incentivize back to the user. So of course, some user can think, I don't want to share my info with anyone. But what if you just share a little bit of aggregated or anonymized data with some business, and they can give you something back? Then I think that will create a very good feedback loop in the ecosystem. Yeah, just imagine.
On the flip side, what would you say are some potential risks when it comes to these incentivization schemes? Because we don't want to attract, for example, bad actors or people who are trying to play the game. What risks do you see with these incentives?
Yeah, I think if just follow my wild idea, then the biggest challenge is how we deal with those privacy data. Because if I think dealing with the privacy is much harder than dealing with the correctness on the blockchain. Since blockchain is just, everyone can verify the blockchain. So if there's anything wrong, you can immediately figure it out. But if it's just some privacy data, it may go to the first provider, the second provider, the third provider, and one of them can have a copy of the data, and you even cannot notice that. So the leakage of the privacy, to me, is the biggest challenge here. But since there are a lot of new technology evolving, probably we can have some solution on that. So for example, multi-party computation, everyone can use the data, but not leaking the data in the whole process. Or something like running on our network, we have some decentralized backend. It's like a black box. So running the program to process the data doesn't necessarily mean they have the access to the raw data. Yeah, but I wouldn't say any of those solutions can be a final solution to the problem. But yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about the evolution of technology.
I think I have to undo. It's my bad. Probably I shifted the debate to the private data, but now thinking about the oracles, which mostly are talking about real world data, and they're moving in a different space. I think there is not much space for bad players because the full technology is designed for that. But the thing is, what I see, and I'm not an expert in that world, but what I see is a lot of fragmentation. When every system creates a new token, right, to incentivize the players, you are keep fragmenting the liquidity. You keep creating a new reward ecosystem that has its own dynamics, right? We have plenty of tokens. We have already existing blockchains. So, in my opinion, it would be better to use the existing dynamics of the blockchain. Like, hey, if all the data in the end is going to be consumed through a smart contract, right? Let's create the value in the smart contracts that already exist. Let's use the tokens that are already used, and then we can split the gains across all the players in the existing tokens and the existing blockchains, right? The fact that every new ecosystem is trying to create their own token, I don't know if it's really in the interest of the community that are going to receive the value, or it's more in the interest of who's creating the token, because basically it's a money printing machine.
We're almost at the end of the time, but before we wrap up, I would like to see from each of you in one sentence, what do you think oracles should prioritize next to advance the ecosystem?
I would say more data sets, like making more diverse data sets available on chain, and make aware their consumers that price data is not only what they have to watch.
I think from my side would be the addition of qualitative data, like we discussed before about reputation. I think quantitative data is under a lot of stress due to the manipulation that we are seeing in the markets.
Yeah, I think it's the barrier to create the oracle. So if we can lower down the barrier to create oracle, maybe any developer can create an oracle in 1-2 days, then we can get very rich data sets, and we can have the good competition between the oracles to finally, I believe, raise the quality of the data set as well.
Thank you. Let's see if we have any questions from the audience.